Hey everyone, we're about to dive into one of the most mind-bending, absolutely fascinating phenomena in all of medicine, the placebo effect. Now, I know you've probably heard of it, but the reality is way more powerful and way more biological than you might think. So let's just kick things off with the question everyone asks. Right? This is the big one. We hear this all the time. The idea that a little sugar pill, something with nothing in it, could actually make you feel better, it just sounds like a trick of the mind. You know, something purely psychological, maybe not even real. But what if I told you this effect isn't just some vague feeling? What if I told you it triggers measurable, physical changes in your brain and in your body? That's what we're going to unpack here. The stunning reality of the placebo effect is that it's not just in your head. It's literally in your biology.
All right, first things first. We need to completely blow up this idea that a placebo is just an inert sugar pill. When you look at the history and especially the science, you realize something much, much deeper is going on.
For the longest time, sure, placebos were just things like bread pills used to keep patients happy. But the whole game changed during World War II. An anesthesiologist, Dr. Henry Beecher, was on the front lines and ran out of morphine. In sheer desperation, he started injecting wounded soldiers with nothing but salt water, but he told them it was a powerful painkiller. And the crazy part? It worked. This wasn't just them imagining it. They got real pain relief. That single observation was a lightning bolt, and it led him to publish his landmark paper, The Powerful Placebo, which basically forced the medical world to take this seriously.
And get this effect goes way beyond pills. A huge review looked at surgical trials, comparing real surgeries to what they call sham surgeries. That's where a patient is prepped, they get an incision, the whole 9 yards, but the surgeon doesn't actually perform the main procedure. The result? In a staggering 51% of those trials, the fake surgery was just as effective as the real one. Let that sink in. Half the time, the elaborate ritual of surgery was enough. It's just wild.
So if it's not magic, what in the world is going on? Well, the answer is tucked away inside our own heads. It turns out our brain runs its own internal pharmacy, and it's fully stocked with powerful chemicals it can release based entirely on what we believe and expect.
First up in the brain's pharmacy are endogenous opioids. These are basically your body's homemade morphine. They're natural painkillers. So when you truly expect to get pain relief, your brain can just release them, dialing down the pain signals all on its own. Think back to those soldiers on the battlefield. That's what was happening. Their belief in the saline painkiller triggered the release of the brain's real painkillers. Then there's dopamine. We all know it as the feel-good chemical, but it's absolutely critical for controlling movement. This is where it gets incredible. In patients with Parkinson's disease, a condition literally caused by a lack of dopamine, brain scan studies have shown what happens when you give them a placebo they think is medicine. You can literally see their brains release a flood of dopamine, and they experience real, objective improvements in their symptoms. It's visible proof. And the list keeps going. Our bodies also produce endocannabinoids, our own version of the active compounds in cannabis. And it turns out that when a placebo response is triggered by something like a standard non-opioid painkiller, it's this system that fires up to provide the relief. The big takeaway here is that the brain isn't a one-trick pony. It has this whole chemical toolkit it can use to create a placebo response depending on the situation. And because the brain has all these different tools, the effects are incredibly widespread. This isn't just about one or two things. We're talking about documented, measurable placebo effects in everything from pain management and Parkinson's to depression, anxiety, addiction, and even inflammatory conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, where a placebo can actually reduce the physical markers of inflammation in the blood. Okay, so we've established that our brain can cook up its own medicine. But what's the trigger? What's the signal that tells the brain's pharmacy to open for business? We've seen the biological what, and now we're going to dig into the psychological how. And it all comes down to the power of context and our own expectations.
See, it turns out not all placebos are created equal. The whole ritual surrounding the treatment matters a lot. A simple pill? Yeah, that can have an effect. But a placebo injection, which feels way more medical and invasive, has an even stronger effect. And at the very top of the ladder, sham surgery. As we saw, this is the most dramatic, involved, and powerful medical ritual, and it produces the most powerful placebo response of all. The more we believe we're getting a serious intervention, the more our body actually responds.
But here's the thing about belief. It is a double-edged sword. Just as a positive expectation can heal, a negative expectation can actually cause harm. Meet the placebo's evil twin, the nocebo effect. If you're told a treatment will have nasty side effects and you expect to feel them, your brain can actually create them. The chemistry is different. Instead of feel-good opioids and dopamine, it might release chemicals that amp up pain and anxiety. It's the exact same principle, just running in reverse.
All right, prepare to have your mind bent a little bit here. You'd think this whole thing hinges on tricking someone, right? Deception seems key, but it's not. In these fascinating studies on open-label placebos, doctors are completely honest. They tell patients, here, take this pill. It's a placebo. It has no active ingredients. And what happens? It still works. This quote nails it. The effect isn't about being fooled. It's about the deep-seated belief in the ritual of healing itself.
So let's ground all this theory in a really powerful modern-day medical puzzle called chemo-brain. It is a perfect case study for how a very real, temporary biological event can create a long-lasting, very real, subjective experience.
Chemo-brain is that cognitive fog that so many cancer patients talk about after their treatment. They feel forgetful, they can't concentrate, it's a real struggle. And what makes it so frustrating for them is that their personal experience is intense, but when they do objective cognitive tests, the results often show only tiny impairments, if any. That disconnect is the core of the puzzle.
So how could this be happening? Researchers have been piecing together this biological domino effect, and the leading hypothesis says it all starts here. When chemotherapy is administered, it causes a temporary but really significant spike in inflammatory molecules called cytokines all through the body.
But hold on, that spike in inflammation is temporary. So how does it lead to a long-term problem? Well, this is the key. That short-lived spike is thought to act like a trigger, flipping a series of permanent epigenetic switches. Now, think of epigenetics as the software that runs on your DNA hardware. It doesn't change your genes, but it changes which genes get turned on and off. So that brief event basically rewrites part of the instruction manual for how your brain cells operate.
And that's the final domino to fall. These lasting epigenetic changes alter how the brain functions, how it communicates with itself, and that creates the persistent, very real, subjective feeling of cognitive fog that patients experience as chemo-brain. It's a perfect example of how a brief physical event can rewire our long-term reality. So after going through the history, the biology, the psychology, what's the big takeaway? What does all this mean for us? Well, understanding the placebo effect isn't just some cool bit of science trivia. It has huge implications for the future of medicine and how we even think about healing.
It really all boils down to this one powerful idea. The context surrounding healing is a form of medicine itself. The rituals, the doctor's office, the trust you have in a clinician, the very words they use, all that stuff we might have dismissed as just bedside manner isn't fluff. It's an active ingredient in the healing process, capable of unlocking our brain's own pharmacy.
And if you think that sounds nice but a little fuzzy, we've got the data to prove it. This classic study from 1987 perfectly illustrates what's called the clinician effect. Patients were given either a positive, confident consultation or a negative, doubtful one. And just look at the difference. 2 weeks later, 64% of the people in the positive group had recovered, compared to only 40% in the negative group. And that was totally independent of any medicine they got. The clinician's words were the active ingredient.
And that leaves us with this one final provocative thought. For hundreds of years, we've been building these massive, complex institutions to develop and deliver medicine. But what if the most sophisticated, most powerful pharmacy in the world isn't one we can build with bricks and mortar? What if it's the one that already exists inside each and every one of us?